I just put that little webcam image up there so that at least you guys can see where I'm working, so we don't have to you don't always have to try and guess. Figure maybe that'll help. So I'm just laying in a kind of base color here, leaving some broken marks, not going super opaque with it everywhere. I want some of that underpainting to show through. Just because I like that look. Something I kind of picked up on doing more oil painting and stuff. And then I'll kind of refine some of the colors, that different shadows and all that stuff. Also, let me know if the if the sound is okay. Still a little bit of a work in progress with this setup. So if something's too loud or not loud enough, just let me know. Good afternoon, Crate. Although it's morning for me. right now I'm just like, I'm going kind of quick and dirty on this stuff just because I want more texture in his kind of overcoat or whatever the hell this thing is. So I'm not going for any kind of really precise sort of stuff yet. We'll get into it. We'll get into, like, you know, some really specific texture. One of the things that I enjoy doing a lot. Which is funny, because in oils, I never really liked rendering. But I think I was always in a crazy hurry. Now I don't feel the need. I hurry every day at work, so on my own stuff I don't really feel the need to rush through it all. Just wanted to get the larger forms to start to read a little better. Thanks. Yeah, with the shadows, I was just kind of, you know, wanting to set up a warm and a cool light source, and some of that stuff will shift. Like, we won't have strong purple shadows in the end result, but I think a bit of that will come through. I like to give myself a base color that I can kind of push and pull either way, warm or cool, saturated or desaturated. So I kind of will bounce back and forth in that way. I feel like this was a little too light. That's better. Man, I cannot wait for layer clipping in the next iteration of Procreate. So I don't have to have all these scrolling selection lines. And a little bit of size variation on this brush would go a long way, which will also be coming in the next version. So I will be very happy. I'm ultimately going to go for like a more of a quilted kind of a look, but maybe like sort of fine quilting on this. But I just want to kind of establish the general large shapes, and then I'll get into like the little details of it. So the lines that you see there were really just kind of placeholders in a way to sort of remind me that, um, there's a texture. Knowing that I wasn't gonna be working on this like straight, Finished up that piece of Dakota yesterday, between yesterday and Saturday. That was fun. And I figured I should finish this one before moving on to the next. I'm just going to block in a few of the colors here before I start jumping into some of the details. Just so I have enough reference points to kind of do what I need to do. So, just gotta go with like a natural kind of white for his shirt here. Yeah, I should probably kick mine down since I don't actually need to see. I always tend to... Is that streaming still? Let me know. It seems like it's glitching out on my end a little bit. So you guys just let me know if the stream drops for any reason. Yeah, I think I have it set to like a 16-second delay or something. Only because when I was first streaming, it would like kind of disconnect but then reconnect, and I wanted to give it a chance to do that so it wouldn't just like split up into a bunch of different little clips. Um, but yeah, let me know if it's like really glitchy. Um, well, not exactly sure what I'll do about it, but hopefully I can do something about it. Some of these things I did not consider colors for beforehand, so now I'm having to kind of figure out what I might want to do. Sorry about that, guys. It seems like there's always something. You like change one little thing and then you gotta figure out a whole nother aspect. Yes, you do want to brew coffee. You always want to brew coffee. One of the nice things with once you set up some major colors, color picking, from the composition just allows you to keep some harmony, I think, in the image without getting too crazy with picking new colors all the time. I mean, it is nice if you want some color variation. It's nice to grab a color and then maybe slightly shift it, but you just want to be. I think it's a little easier in digital to get a little crazy with the colors because you literally have every single 16.7 million colors right here, right? Whereas with oils or something similar, you might set up a more limited palette for yourself to kind of keep track of that stuff and avoid it to a degree. And I know some people get into setting up palettes for their images, key colors here in the swatches, right? I haven't quite gotten into that, though it does make sense if you're doing a character design, especially, to maybe set up some of the key local colors. I could see doing that. I haven't done it, but it makes sense. So maybe I will at some point. Let's just knock in all the the basic colors for this guy, all around, and then get into some noodling. Noodling is fun. Sometimes, not always. I don't always like noodling. Sometimes I like just doing the major sketch and then moving on. I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. Sick of looking at it. Let's actually give this wooden staff a little bit of like a golden kind of wood. Only because it is going to be wrapped in leather, and I wanted the leather to be more dark leather, like a dark distressed kind of leather, so I don't want it to all blend into the same. So for that, we'll go with like a sienna or umber kind of a look. Yeah, but then once you brew the coffee, you'll be super productive. At least, that's what I tell myself when I ask myself, do I really need another latte? Be like, yeah, it'll help me focus. Will it though? Or will it just make me jittery? Of course, if you're doing art, you have to be careful with that, right? Let's get into that sword a little bit. Like, I'm always careful with that. Like, if I have more coffee right now, it's gonna make my hand shake. Maybe. In which case, not a good idea. I'm just using the keyboard down here, by the way, for hotkeys. This little guy. Awesome little foldable Microsoft Bluetooth thing. It's pretty rad. I don't love that it only has one command key on the left side. I wish it had one on the right side, but I'm getting used to it, and it's actually not as big of a deal as I thought it might be. And Melmade Dukes is currently live. He does fun stuff. Nice, really nice sense of stylization. I dig it. Don't you dare go watch him right now. No, just kidding. You can if you want. You can put us both on. I won't be offended. Getting a little bit of detail in there. Not much just yet. Not just yet. Always a decision whether I want a silver belt buckle or like a bronze belt buckle. I think we'll go for more of a bronze. Let's get that greenish yellow going. Just for a base color. And I think I actually want the belt to be more of like a raw leather belt, so not a ton of color. Well, not entirely true. There will be color on the edges and stuff where it's been worn, but I don't want it to be like brown leather belt. Just because. No other reason than just because, to do something a little different. But once I get into the details, I'll get into kind of where it will have like caught color from oils in your hands and that kind of thing on the edges, and like scuff marks and all that stuff. But yeah, that's down the line. Howdy, Earl. Gotta get a little darker. Some of this stuff, if it starts to get too textured, which, I mean, it kind of already is in areas, easy enough to just, smudge some of that to make it a little less noisy, right? I can always bring in some noise if I want down the line. I don't want to get rid of all of it either, because like on cloth and stuff, especially on his overcoat here, it is a more rough quilted kind of a thing, so I'll keep a bit of texture there. I just don't want everything to be so heavily textured, because I want some contrast. I've been having a lot of fun kind of controlling that stuff. I have so many shortcuts for texture in Photoshop in terms of just specific brushes, that it's been a lot of fun actually getting into Procreate and being more hands-on with just actually painting them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my brush set in Photoshop, and it makes a lot of shit go way faster. But it has been nice to just slow down a little bit, still faster at this point than I would be traditionally, but slower than Photoshop, but in a good way, I think, where it gives me the opportunity to consider and think through a bit more. Just wanted to lighten up that blue. And we'll see, I'll probably get into like cooling the lights off a little bit as I go, because I don't want them to be so orange, but I think it's a good idea to get all the kind of base colors in and then see how it feels. Like, I like getting some of that purple shadow showing through. I definitely dig that. But let's this guy's been on the road for a while, so, you know, he's had to put some patches and stuff, and from maybe whatever he had available. So when we first meet him, he will be kind of a hobo knight. That's a good question. It depends on how old the sketchbooks are. I do keep them now, because sometimes I'll look back on them and there's some really good ideas in there, and I may want to use those ideas or revisit them or something. You know, sometimes like I may have had a good idea, but I didn't have the capacity to actually do something with it, and so it goes on the back burner, not because it was bad, just because, you know, whatever, I didn't have the connections maybe, or who knows. So I'll keep some of those, but I did some years back I did get rid of like my really old ones from, you know, junior college and stuff, because I used to draw on the Strathmore sketchbooks, and I probably had a stack of them that was about, I don't know, almost 3 feet tall, and it was just a lot to lug around. And so I ended up getting rid of those. I may have pulled out some pages, but realistically, I was kind of like, you know what? If I can't do something better than this now, I'm in trouble, because they were old. So, yeah, I don't keep all of them, but I think now, since I tend to draw in a moleskin, as far as sketchbooks go, they're a lot easier to manage and lug around, and, you know, even, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think my moleskins don't go back that far, though. I think I only started drawing in them 5 or 6 years ago. Nah, probably 5 years ago, thereabouts. So I haven't had to deal with getting rid of stuff again yet. So let's start figuring out some texture. I'm gonna put it on the layer above the line work, and I still keep wanting to use my Photoshop hotkeys. Turn that up a little. One of the things I do when I'm considering texture, especially something like this where I'm gonna have stitching and that kind of thing, I really try and sort of end with the positive forms. And what does that mean? That means I don't want these to look like line art. You know, I don't want them to read as lines. Ultimately, I'm going to want it all to read as form. And so I'll point it out when I get there. I'm just going to be laying in all these kinds of lines first. And then what I do is I, you know, come in with the lighter colors, or the positive form, so the color of the actual coat, and then I start to cut back into those to create my shapes and my forms. You know, unless you are doing something where you want the line work to be part of it, right? And that's fine, because like I love awesome line art. It's amazing, but that's not what I'm going for here. Just trying to decide on the quilting pattern I want. I don't actually want it to be like really complex. I want it to be kind of subtle. So just doing a bit of like a broken line. And then I'll come in with some more stitching, you know, coming across in some way. I'm just, while I'm deciding what kind of shape I want I want that to create, I'm doing the ones that I know. Sometimes I'll have part of it figured out, but then a lot of it I might figure out on the fly, right? Similar to kind of when I'm inking, I don't try and figure out every single aspect. By the way, if you guys did not see Bobby Chu's live stream on YouTube, he did announce Lightbox Expo, and it looks amazing. Those of us who used to do Comic-Con International, right, in San Diego, this is sort of what we wanted that to be. It's basically just about the art. And my guess is he probably got into it because CTN sort of treated him like shit. Him and a bunch of others. So, as far as I know, he is never doing CTN again. And he was very open about that, I believe, on his social media. And so he has teamed up with the guy who does Emerald City Comic Con, and they're doing Lightbox Expo, and it will be here in Pasadena next year in September. And there's already a killer lineup of artists. Lightboxexpo.com, definitely worth checking it out. I recommend it. Now I'm debating whether I want the cross shapes. I'm kind of digging the shape that this creates, and I don't actually need it to go across, although it keeps the stuffing in place more, right? From a logistical standpoint, I suppose it makes sense. And given the lifestyle that some of these guys had, they would have opted for function over form in a lot of cases. Unless they're just some rich dude who just has to tell other people what to do. I'd gotten this poncho years ago in Mexico. This wool poncho. It was just so cool because it had this, you know, in the neck it had these built-in scarf, and I always liked that. Just thought that was rad. So that's what I did here. Gave him a built-in scarf because it makes sense. Now let's get into this. Might warm that up a little. It's amazing how much just subtly pushing the temperature can do. So this is where, let's get in here. This is where I'll start to really focus on the actual form and not just, you know, not just leave all this stuff as lines. And I'll go back and forth, you know. I'll cut in and then I might decide I want to reinforce some of those lines. And I debated making it look more like stitching too, which I might still do, and that's easy enough to do along the way. So a lot of it just comes down to, I just want to make sure to kind of hit, you know, the edges to give everything a sense of form and dimension. I don't want it to flatten out, right? And that's what can happen if you just leave something feeling like an outline. It can just flatten out if you're not careful. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. And then just starting to get some texture along the way. I'm like taking a Steve Houston approach where I'm just like scrubbing the brush around. I was always amazed the results he gets in his oils when he does that. He'll just scrub that thing exactly how we were told never to paint in school, and just ends up with amazing, amazing paintings and textures. So let's take a page from his book and scrub around a bit, and then, you know, you can always come in with smudge tool and smooth some of this shit out if you want to, but not entirely necessary. But what I do want to make sure is that I am catching kind of the edges. So then if I just take a kind of darker color too and just hint it at some shadows to just turn those little quilted forms a bit. Sometimes doing this stuff and you're like describing what you're doing and you start to feel, you know, a little bit like Bob Ross. And just give those quilted forms a nice sense of shape. Just round them off. Keep him nice and warm. Those cold nights on the road. Just like that. There. Doesn't that look cozy? Anyway. One of the things I try to do is, and I mean, there's no like shortcut, there's no easy way to describe it, or at least not in a way where everyone will just be like, oh cool, I can do that now. But I try and make sure that I can use whatever I've laid in underneath, right? I don't want to just like sit there and establish stuff and then completely paint over it, because then I feel like, well, what's the point? Why did I just spend the time to do all that stuff if I'm just going to paint it all out, you know? In some cases it's fine, like with the line work it'll mostly be painted out, but it'll still peek through in places and the accented darks and stuff, so you know, it still has a purpose. And then the other thing to kind of remember is that if this is, you know, more or less based on like medieval times, like how perfect would the quilting really be? Probably not super perfect. So I probably made it a little more perfect than it should be, but that's okay. We'll get into some you know, scuffing it up and all that stuff. Although for here, I actually don't need a selection because I'm painting on top. And I want to control these edges more. It's always something to remember, softer forms, softer edges. Right? It helps to sell that texture. Yeah. It's not a machined shape, so we don't want it to feel like that. Yeah, I am wearing a glove for the tablet. It's funny, so I tend to wear these burgundy ones when I do digital, and I wear the black ones when I do pencil work, because oftentimes I'm drawing with a black pencil, and the burgundy ones just start to look really gnarly as they like pick up the pencil. And then the color coding just helps me know, like, I'm not going to grab a pencil one to work on the tablet, because then the grime and stuff will get on the screen over time. So it just helps me, easily keep them separate. So I'm not like, wait, which one is my digital glove and which one's my analog? Yeah. And it helps my hand slide across the screen, right? Because these things do heat up and your hand will start to sweat, and yeah, it's just not fun. Let's go a little warmer. Adding a bit of texture. Ah, thanks for the host, Poo Poo Dimpim. And hi guys, Baldake, Safety Pigeon, Baldake. I don't know how you want me to pronounce that. We're just scribbling away here. So it's in sometimes little areas like this that'll also really help you to start to sell. Because some of this stuff, like with the quilting, right, it's a lot easier to kind of sell that sort of like poofiness on the edges where you can really catch that shape. So that's something to just keep in mind. Take advantage of those things when you can. So I'll get into that a bit. And I just want to start to also make sure I'm sort of painting out some of these contour lines, right? I don't want it to be an outline. It's not what I'm going for on this piece. I don't mind keeping some interior lines, but I don't want to keep any contour lines. That'll flatten the shapes out. Don't really have enough shadows established on this, so let's bring that in. The nice thing is too, once I get enough, you know, fake paint built up, I can start to smudge things and kind of push and pull shapes in that way, which is a lot of fun. I always enjoy doing that. It's similar to oils. Sometimes like oil painting, it doesn't really like take off and start coming together until you get enough paint on your surface and you can kind of like push and pull those things a bit. And I mean, a lot of this stuff, you know, the reason it can feel nitpicky, I think, is because, you know, anytime you're dealing with any kind of a actual form, right? Not just an outline, but any actual form, it has an effect, you know, light affects it in some way, and it can be sometimes a pain in the ass to then go through and be like, all right, I gotta light every little thing. But I think that's kind of part of it, and that's part of what helps to sell it as whatever, you know, whatever you're going for. Cast some shadows here. Another thing you never want to underestimate is the power of ambient occlusion, so getting some like occlusion shadows where you can. Generally that's better done with just a soft brush, but in this case, like, it also works just having it on kind of low opacity. Then I can jump around. Some of them are occlusion shadows, some aren't. Right, because then I can just smudge some stuff. let's you know, on something like this, knowing that it's seen a lot of wear and tear, it's, I don't know, it's kind of nice to get a little bit of subtle sort of fraying in areas, maybe even like some of the thread, because he's probably had to repair this thing a few times as well. So little details, little details. What I'm doing with this is, so I'm running this off of a Mac, right? And the nice thing with QuickTime is if you set up a movie recording on QuickTime, you can choose your source, and if your iPad is plugged into your computer, it'll come up as a source. So it'll just mirror the screen. And then I'm just using OBS to capture the QuickTime screen. So it's actually very simple, and seems like the most the most effective way that I've found. So, because everything else I saw, because I was looking up like how the hell can I stream Procreate? I know they have a live stream option in the app. It didn't really seem to do anything for me. It was like, oh, these are the apps that it works with, and literally nothing came up. So I was like, well, that isn't fucking helpful. And then everything else I looked up just looked way too complicated. And it's like, dude, if you can stream a fucking video game from your phone, like, it should be pretty simple to stream anything else that's using the screen. So yeah, QuickTime and OBS. Just want to catch a little bit of light in here. Let's catch some, a little bit of fill light, maybe. I want to go crazy with it, but just on these top planes and the shadows, a little bit of fill. Yeah, I had tried. When was that? Saturday. I had at first tried streaming with the Streamlabs app. Um, you can enable screen recording, and then it'll, if you have the Streamlabs app, it'll come up as an option to stream to when you do your screen recording. But man, that thing was dropping the stream like every. I mean, it would vary. There was no rhyme or reason really, but I think in about an hour it dropped it like 5 times. So that was a giant pain in the ass. It wasn't gonna work. So that's when I thought, oh well, maybe, because I knew I could do a screen recording or a screen grab with QuickTime. So that's when I was like, oh well, then maybe I can just grab that window with OBS. And sure enough, works like a charm, as long as my webcam resolution is not up too high. I keep wanting to hit spacebar to scroll the image, but it's not Photoshop. But I wish they would give me that option, because I really want to do it. It's a pain in the ass to then have to, go with 2 fingers and move things around. I don't like that. Just want to reinforce some of these shadows. It's kind of interesting. It like when I good, yeah. I want it to look warm and cozy. His poncho. Yeah, when I started really getting more into oil painting and it even it went into my drawing too. I just realized after a certain point I would kind of rough things in, but then I would really just start to finish it out. So I would just start in one area and start working my way out and finishing as I went. And it's one of the things that I really find myself doing in Procreate, because I can't really see the entire image at once, and I don't want to be bouncing around a whole lot because it's kind of a pain in the ass. I don't like that. I can't really hit any kind of a rhythm doing that. So yeah, I just find myself start at the top and work my way down and just start finishing. And it's kind of fun because then I'll get into it, I'll finish a section, and then this new material pops up. I'm like, oh, how am I gonna show this one now? Yeah, it's kind of fun to do. Let's make this guy a little smaller. Or in this case, what I'll probably do is I'll finish out his entire poncho. So I'm not just gonna switch over to the sleeves, because you do kind of get into a rhythm and you have a certain understanding of the material right then and there, and so you can kind of start to move a bit quicker. awesome timing. Got too much work to do. Realizing this stitching is not ideally placed. So because it's going like right along the line of the shadow there. Although technically that wouldn't be in shadow, so maybe it's not a big deal. But I don't like that it was running completely parallel with that. You know what? We can probably just say it's hidden underneath. It's a little design things, like there's a certain level where you might just be going for, you know, a certain amount of realism, but we also need to consider like the design of an image, and is it pleasing to look at? Are there weird tangents that don't need to be there? That maybe we can and should get rid of. And believe me, once you start looking, tangents are hard to miss and hard to avoid. And I have no idea if like getting into this kind of detailed stuff, I don't know if that's super interesting for people or not. Obviously it's part of the process. I know the fun shit to watch is kind of the flashier, like quick sketch stuff. But at a certain point, if you're gonna just paint things up, this is what it looks like. And this is probably where digital is also a whole lot better. So you're not literally watching paint dry, right? With oils and watercolor, there are times you have to wait for it to dry a bit before you can work into an area some more. At least with digital, we can bypass that. So some of these forms I really want to start to turn a bit more. Probably gonna be a little too big. that shirt. Better correct that. What I'm realizing is this should come in front. Oh, the little things. Sometimes you get so caught up in like whatever you're doing and something doesn't quite occur to you. And then you start, you know, considering it in a more realistic sense. And then stuff might start to pop out. Right, so that should be in light. Let's go to the proper layer for that. That's a novel idea. Stick to the workflow you set up. Anyway, just a placeholder. Oops. And that ambient occlusion that I was talking about, right? Just those areas where a form will completely block out light so you don't even get ambient light in there. Helps to sell things a bit. And just wanted to reinforce this cast shadow a bit here. Not really sure when I started to really enjoy like painting up materials, because I really feel like there was a point where I did not like it. I had no interest, and it kind of crept up on me, and somewhere along the lines I realized I was pretty good at it. But I'm not really sure why, because it's not like I necessarily practiced it, but I think maybe other things that I was practicing gave me an eye for some of it, but I really don't know. Regardless, I enjoy it a lot now. So, you know, I guess that's a good thing. And like, I really enjoy actually painting it up, not just using, you know, textured brushes, even though this brush does have a texture on it, but I'm not always using that texture, I guess. Like sometimes I am, other times I'm actually painting out the texture, right? Because if I go totally opaque with the brush, then that texture goes away. So, yeah, I'm not always using it. Pay you in vodka. Depends on how much you like vodka. I think you'd be better off asking them for like a specifically like Russian alcohol. You know, like what's their equivalent to moonshine, like something that you can't really get here. I'm not a huge vodka drinker, though there are a couple of cocktails that we will make that involve vodka. Specifically because it doesn't bring any flavor with it. Not really. Sort of does. Depending on how you use it. I had almost gone with like a rough sort of knit on this, but then I decided I wanted him to have at least somewhat of a, you know, a sense of nobility in a way, where maybe he would have something that was once really nice, but is maybe like rather worn now, you know, so something that would have like taken more time to produce in a way, or had a cleaner look at a certain point. So that's why I decided to go with something that was more quilted like this. So easy to miss those little spots if you don't you don't catch them and do something about them. So this is where, after a while of kind of working on a specific thing, you can start to develop a process, which is great because then if you kind of encounter something like this again, it's not to say that like you'll remember exactly how to do it, but you will you'll remember to a degree, and it won't feel so strange. So just knowing that, okay, like I just want to establish a bit more of the modeling and the form and the shadows first, and then kind of cut into that with the lights, or with the lighter forms, and that helps me just start to kind of get it done quicker, sort of line up the challenges and knock them down. At a certain point I might also knock that white background back. Sometimes having that white is what I found on that Dakota piece. Like my eyes were starting to kind of hurt, not hurt, but like I was found myself like squinting a lot. I realized like, cause she's wearing like all charcoal gray, right? So it's dark, and I'm sitting there like struggling against a white background, trying to get the subtlety in those forms. And as soon as I kicked it down to gray, I was like, oh my god, all of a sudden like I could see, I didn't have to strain. So even with some of the darker colors, like I might kick that background down. In fact, let's do that. Just because the nice thing is then you don't have to compete with the white for your highlights, right? Because if you have that white, then sometimes the highlights don't look as bright as you might want. So it's kind of nice to just find something. We could go really dark, but then I don't want that. I want some silhouette. I like that. I'm mad at that. So that kind of gives me a better sense of where my values are. Yeah, it could be like a worn downfill, could be cotton, it could just be wool, but probably wool or down, I guess, would make more sense because they'll keep you warm even if they get wet. So that kind of stuff makes more sense. Yeah, so I darkened that, and all of a sudden he doesn't look so high contrast, which I like. I like that slightly more muted muted value range. grab that fill light a bit, throw some of that in. You know, the nice thing also with the darker background is you can choose, like if you want a slight rim light on stuff at the end, like you can throw that in and you'll be able to see it a lot better as rim light versus having a white background. Alright. If you set up a process for for painting something, it's a good idea to kind of keep that going. Right, so a bit of those scribblies in there. To kind of help keep that texture that we sort of set up. It was his right shoulder, screen left. One of the reasons doing something like this I'll bounce around a little bit is to avoid just falling into a pattern, because you know it's just how our brain wants to work. We want to find patterns, we want to act in patterns, and so if you start doing it, before you know it, you'll find yourself like 5 squiggles, 5 squiggles, 5 squiggles, 5 squiggles, and then it all looks really repetitive and boring. So if you want a bit of organic kind of a feel, which I do, that's where my kind of bouncing around helps me keep that. So I don't just fall into the same repetitive pattern. You know, it's just muscle memory. Like it'll do that. It'll subconsciously just work its way into something. Yeah, it might be in the amount of strokes that you put down. It could be in the length of the stroke or the shape of the stroke. Like there's all kinds of ways that we can kind of fall into that trap. Of like bland repetition, and we don't want that. It's one of our big enemies as artists. Repetition and tangents. Damn those tangents. buddy of mine would always call me out on them because they would just happen, and sometimes I just couldn't even believe that I didn't see them. And he would just be like, "Oh yeah, I had to fix some of your tangents," because he would paint up my sketches at work, and I was like, "What tangents?" And he'd show me. I'd be like, "Oh my god, how the hell did I not see that?" So, Mr. Nentrup, thank you for that. I still hear your voice in my head when I see tangents, but at least I see them now, and I do my best to work them out. See, the other thing with darkening that background is I saw that some of the areas I thought were darker, like had accented darks, were not as dark as I thought. So I just want to throw some of these accents in here to kind of, they help bring a bit more depth, you know. Helps to make things sit back a little further. See, now all of a sudden those shadows don't look so dark. Well, that's cool. We'll get into them. I don't mind. I kind of like that air in the shadows. It gives us a bit of a feeling like he could be out in an environment somewhere, so that's cool. I'm okay with that. Let's finish out this coat. Accents there. Alright. A.R. Turkel and I had a teacher at Art Center first term, our Design 1 teacher, who would call this kind of stuff, you know, where you're just like kind of noodling, you're getting into little details, and you just sort of have to zone out and just kind of do it, right? Where it's like, it's really zen, but it's also like, it's just this sort of like anal little details. So he would call it zanal. He'd be like, it's so zen, it's anal. It's zanal. Right, where the details have to be right, but then there's so many of them that you just have to like kind of go into your head and think of other things while you just sort of do it. And you don't overthink it. There is a time and a place for overthinking, though, right? When you get it to a certain point, you do have to kind of look at it with a very critical eye and say, okay, is this right? Is it done? Is this what I'm going for? Or do I want to add something to it? Are there any like little tweaks I could do that might, elevate it? And it might not, because then you also have to ask yourself, like, does it need to be elevated? Is that going to buy me anything? Because it won't always. Yeah, there's no point in detailing the shit out of something if it's like way far away from your focal area and doesn't play a crucial role in the story. Right? At a certain point, I can probably just simplify some of this stuff because I've detailed it out elsewhere, closer to the face. And so people will know what they're looking at if I simplify it. Yeah, the belt is fancy. The purple, like his tunic, definitely, I'm underneath. He would actually have his sigil underneath the jacket, and his house color would be this kind of blue purple, blue violet. So there are definitely telltale signs of like, he's not a beggar, but he's been on the road for a while, and I'm not going to give away his whole story. Just know that he does have a story. He's got a story to tell. Little details. This strap has like, I don't know, red stitching on the edges, I think. I'd like to vary the colors of leather, right? Like, I mean, there are two different belts, and back then, I mean, everything would have been kind of hand done. So I don't want it all to have the same color leather, right? So we'll get a little darker, more kind of red leather on this one. This one will be more of a, a lighter leather. I'm catching some. Yeah, let's do. This. Some of that fill light. No, that girl I did. If you're meaning the one that I posted last night, no, that's a completely different story. Obviously the one with the cowboy hat and stuff. That's more of a sci-fi story, whereas this is a straight fantasy. Just want to get some little wear and tear on this stuff. Yeah, two different stories. Reason being that wasn't that I couldn't decide which one to do. It was that I find if I'm only working on like one story, I start wanting to try and squeeze everything into it. So it helps me, even if, one of them is much more of a focus, it helps me to kind of have a couple of them going so that, where they're kind of like different tones. So that if I have one that's a little darker, maybe I can put those kind of dark things in that story, and then the other one I can keep that kind of lighter. And then depending on my mood, I can sort of, choose which one to work on at the time. So, I was losing that cast shadow there, which I don't want to do. A picture like this? No, it won't take weeks. I mean, realistically, if I sit on this and paint all day, I could probably finish him in about a day. It might take a little more, maybe a day and a half. So, let's say each sitting is 10 hours. I would say I'd finish him in about 15 hours. But it depends. Sometimes I'll get in a zone and just start like knocking stuff down. I will say it would go faster in Photoshop for me, because there are ways that I could shortcut some of this stuff. But currently, I'm actually really enjoying taking a little more time A little more time to do this stuff than I normally would. It just gets me considering it in a different way, and I think that's a good thing. But if I were really to just go to town on it, like, I could blaze through it fairly quick, I think. At least, quicker than what I'm doing right now. But I'm less concerned with speed and more concerned with just getting something I'm happy with. At work, it's all about getting shit done quick. I don't really feel the need to do that with my own stuff. Rivets. I like doing this kind of stuff, though, like, just sort of giving things some wear and tear, making them well worn, well loved, or maybe not well loved, I don't know. But it's fun. Fun little kind of, it's not like there are any tricks to it. It's not anything crazy, but it gives a nice added sense of storytelling, I think. And what's nice also is that maybe he might have something, another element, like, suppose he had another bag or something, because there's actually a bag slung over his shoulder that's what that kind of red leather strap is for. But suppose he had a brand new bag too, that he picked up somewhere, then maybe that strap wouldn't be all worn in, and then you could get some nice contrast doing that. So it's fun to kind of add those little elements. Oh, you mean that one I did in watercolor? I think last week or something, the girl with the spear, like the feathered wing in her hair. I'm assuming that's the one you're talking about, because yeah, she is part of the story, for sure. She is actually the main character. I mean, this guy plays a huge role in it too, so it's hard to say that, she wouldn't be able to get it done without his help. So there's that. But she's still the main character. I'm actually going to paint her up next. I almost was going to start on her today, but then I was like, no. I already did like the beginning of a piece on Saturday, which was this piece. Like I didn't necessarily want to make you guys sit through that again. I mean, I may still stream that as well, because at the end of the day, it's more I'm just doing what I do and essentially just turning the camera on, and folks can watch or not as they wish. Just seeing if I want to get Rimlight is such a cheap cheat sometimes, but I don't know. I feel like if you don't overdo it, then maybe it's okay. I use the shit out of it at work. But it can be a nice way just to, help pop something, Unless you want, I love how everything I say is like, you should do this, unless you don't want to. Because, there's always exceptions to every rule. I'm just seeing if I like kind of popping out that form from the background a little bit. And I think I do, actually. Kind of dig that. It's subtle, not overdoing it. So we'll stick with that for now. Did I mention Throne of Glass? Not Throne of Glass. I did mention her other series. I haven't read that series yet. I'm curious though. I've heard that it's good. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind jumping into that, and I think I might read that next once I finish I Am Not a Serial Killer by Dan Wells, which I'm almost done. So that Throne of Glass series will probably be next. Did you like the book? She has an interesting way of writing. I know this series that I read, and I wish I knew the name of the actual series, but it's the Court of Thorns and Roses and whatever, court of this and court of that. good series. It was just she made some interesting choices that I don't know that I would have made, and part of me is like, oh well, it would have been better if she had done this, but I don't know that it actually would have been better. And she's a New York Times best-selling author, and I'm not, so I think it might be a safe assumption to defer to her choices a little bit. Alright, let's pop in a couple little details here. Too saturated. Just scribbling in some little highlights just to at least indicate some form. I'm not gonna zoom so far in that I start really getting into each individual thread. Who knows, I might at some point, but not right now. Not right now. One of the things I love on the iPad is the screen resolution. So it's like I don't have to zoom in on everything. I can treat it a little more like I would an actual painting, and maybe just get a little closer if I want to detail something out. I'll still zoom in, obviously we had zoomed in on the face when I was working on that because the face is important. So, yeah, I've found that she does, what threw me off on the other series that I read, and we could probably look it up. Sure, I can find it on here. Of course, I have not signed in to Kindle on this phone. That's fine. That's what the Googles are for. Court of Thorns and Roses. Let's see what... It didn't seem to have... I hate it when they don't list like a Court of Mist and Fury. Like sometimes they'll list the name of the series. But not always. Yeah, so I guess the series was called A Court of Thorns and Roses. At least that's what it looks like to me. And it was good. But there were aspects and the things that bothered me, which, who knows if they're super important or not, but it was that I couldn't exactly tell the time period, which was, I knew like they're using swords and stuff, but then the language of it felt just a little too modern. Like the language the characters would use, their style of speaking felt maybe a little too modern. And then she would kind of mention like like the toilet or something, and it was just the impression that you got. For some reason you thought of like a very modern toilet, which was weird. So you know, I had some issues, but I still liked it overall, and I really liked the characters, and I've found myself even still, and I finished that book a while ago, meaning the latest book in the series I finished a while ago, but I found myself like missing the characters. So obviously she did something very right, and even if there were issues, you know, I don't really feel like they were deal breakers. Alright, I'm trying to decide what kind of folds I might want. Right, so this kind of cloth, I don't want it to feel the same as this. I want this stuff to feel a bit thinner, which is gonna mean smaller, more detailed folds in areas. And this stuff I actually find like kind of fun to paint around and figure out a bit. Another thing that I used to fucking hate painting was drapery cloth. Like, ugh, hated that shit. Now I actually rather enjoy it. Once you kind of set it up, you have to be careful not to make everything so even, right? It's like these shapes are way too similar. But yeah, once I actually like set it up, it's kind of easy to start to paint it out. Main thing to remember with cloth is that it's a simple kind of oscillation of form shadow, cast shadow, right? So if you have a form shadow on the fold, right, since we have the light coming from up here, you have a form shadow on the fold, means it's going to be casting a shadow on the fold next to it. So it's literally like just a matter of soft shadow, hard shadow, soft shadow, hard shadow. And then you can get in, if you really want to get into it, you know, you can get into core shadows and all that stuff too, depending on how detailed you're trying to go with it. And I'm not sure. But it's just oscillating the form shadow and cast shadow, and then sort of getting the hang of the type of folds. You know, you're gonna have those kind of suspended folds. I don't know what the technical term is. They actually have terms for the different types of folds, but where it's hanging down from a form, you'll have compression folds like this right here, where you know, it's exactly what it sounds like. The cloth is just compressing. So that's where you'll get a bit of that accordion flavor to it. You know, I think I might actually have Prince of Thorns. I just haven't read it yet. I feel like I kind of bought um, several books that had good reviews. Um, some of them I just wasn't quite in the mood for yet when I got them, so I didn't really read through them. But I figure I will eventually. And I think I have Prince of Thorns. I'm almost positive. Almost. Smudge tool is our friend. This part feels a little too soft in a way, like too perfect of a curve. It's tricky sometimes to avoid that when you are trying to get like a soft material. And you want it to feel flowing a little bit, but there's definitely there's a balance there, I think, where it's easy to go too far with that sort of flowiness. Like you still need, I think, some of the angles. Honestly, this is where it would be much easier if I just took a couple minutes and grabbed some reference of these like Renaissance shirts. There's a ton of reference out there, but I also enjoy just trying to figure it out. You know, it sticks in my head a little bit more that way. If I do try and figure it out and I find something that works and I find something that at the very least doesn't look wrong, and we'll see. I may actually look for some reference just to see how how close I got, or see if there was something I didn't think about. And then if I feel like, oh, you know what, that'll really add to it, then I'll go back and paint a bit more after looking at that reference. We'll see. Cool. So we've got that one set up, and I like all the kind of weird color modulation that's happening in there, right? We're getting some of that underpainting showing through in the warms. Just nice, gives it a nice sort of painterly vibe, and that makes me happy. sometimes you have to just sort of paint over something. It's not always a good idea to paint around, right? Because that will start to really dictate your shapes. So that's where obviously having layers is so nice, because you can always just like go back to your line layer to see, you know, if you do paint over some details, you can just kind of like, you can go back to it. I will like cut into shapes a bit, knowing that I will sort of cut back out, but I don't want it to end at those outlines, right? Like for the hands and stuff, I don't want to stop there, because it starts to give those outlines form, or like they become part of the image, right? And I don't have to cut too far in. It's just enough to kind of finish out that thought. We're listening to the Battlestar Galactica soundtrack. Flesh and Bone is the track. And it is from... Oh, it's on random. I didn't realize that. That's okay. I think it's from season 1, actually. Bear McCreary being a complete badass. Some of this stuff just really isn't feeling right. Of course, this is a little trickier. The arm position. I think I need to give give these folds a little more volume. They're just feeling a little too like flat, and I don't want that. And that's mostly a matter of placing the highlights. That's feeling way too busy. That's why. Can be a little nerve-wracking sometimes when you like paint something out. If you want to sidestep that, you just do it on another layer, but it's not like I was gonna ruin it anymore, so no point. These shirts can get weird because they're so billowy, and you'll get all kinds of different folds going on in them. They can get a little tricky as a result. Yeah, and that's where if like accuracy was really important for this, you know, I mean, if I was doing like a finished illustration for like a book cover or something, I think it, you know, sometimes is better to maybe get a little more accurate. In which case I would probably just find reference or shoot some reference. Just to make sure that I have something accurate to fall back on. But for this purpose, I'm mostly just having fun. And I like to try and figure out what the hell I'm doing wrong. I feel like I lost some of that warmth, and we're just going to cheat some of that back in. I think it helps the two of these sleeves to kind of sit together as being, you know, part of the same item of clothing. Feels better. Word. quick. Get that in. Sometimes I get so used to like not zooming in that I'll find myself working on like at the very bottom of the screen. It's like, what am I doing? I can at least move it. Up, gardeners are here. I apologize. Not my fault. Fucking leaf blowers. What are you gonna do? Someone's got to keep up the landscaping, I guess. He's coming along. Oh, all right. I think I might call it for today. I might be on later. I've got a little bit of thinking to do before I move forward on him. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it for today. So thank you guys for joining me. We got a nice big chunk done. We got those basic colors laid in and started finishing him out. Any part of this I don't stream, at least I'll have the full Procreate process video. I know it's not the same, but at least I can put that up somewhere on YouTube or something. So until then, I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in and watching to me ramble on about my